But what I'm trying to say is that a lot of the things that are part of the social welfare state, which are resisted on the right wrongly because of a bad argument about freedom, can be supported correctly with a good argument from freedom.
Yeah, but there's also a rejection of, scientific Marxian kinds of ideas that history has some predetermined course that leaves us out of control. You're putting people and democratic movements and political parties and governments right back at the center. It's a question of what we choose to do, right? There's no embrace of dialectical materialism in here.
No, I mean, the move that I make there several times is to point out how the folks who claim to be rejecting Marxism the hardest are, in fact, the people who are most like Marxists. The trick is to, get rid of the humanities and history so nobody has any idea what Marxism was, and then behave like a Marxist and then call your enemies Marxists. No, that's it. This whole idea that capitalism will make you free, or that capitalism brings democracy. The capitalism brings democracy is Marx. That's Marx. Marx says that capitalism brings a bourgeois revolution with a kind of limited democracy. That's what Marx says. Marx said that. But more fundamentally, the idea that the superstructure, your sense whether you're free or not, depends upon the substructure, the mode of economic production, capitalism. That's a Marxian way of seeing the world. That's economic determinism. One of the great ironies in American thought is that after 1989 and the fall of communism, we immediately picked up on economic determinism. It never dropped, right? The communists tried to drop it, and we grabbed it before it hit the ground, and we ran with it, and we've been running with it for decades. The idea that the economy is going to bring you a certain kind of political system or a certain kind of moral state is a basically Marxist idea. And in our Silicon Valley friends, the libertarian ones, it's taken to an extreme, where they're like late Marxists. They're like decadent Marxists. They're like Marxists in the 1970s. They said, okay, look, there's a change in the mode of production. We're shifting away from the old kind of modes of production to a new kind of modes of production. It's going to be digital. It's going to be fantastic. It's going to be great. They sound exactly like the Marxists of the 1920s at that point. And then after it doesn't work out, after it turns out, and this is going to be a very brief summary of the consequences of the digital revolution, after it turns out that we're all fatter, stupider, and live shorter lives, after that turns out, then they say, just like the Marxists in the 1970s, well, maybe we were wrong about that whole revolution thing, but there's no alternative. It's got to be like this, right? And so the internet today is like Brezhnevian communism in the 1970s. Like, okay, it's not what we were promising you, but it's going to go on forever, right? And so they're like that. So the people who act like they're the most anti-Marxist, or they're some kind of, that they're on the right somehow, in a weird way, have recapitulated the whole Marxist way of seeing the world. And then when it fails to work out, they've also recapitulated the failure.
You must have been pleased, I assume, to see the Democratic Convention to the extent you could, and the emphasis on freedom and liberty that now pervades, the progressive attack on our own homegrown authoritarians and autocrats and kleptocrats.
It's been kind of an odd thing to watch for me personally, Jamie, because I really like it's a kind of micro-encapsulation of the shift from President Biden to Vice President Harris in general, because President Biden was more fixated on the question of preserving democracy from tyranny. And I agree with him. I think those are the stakes too, but politically, it probably works better to talk about freedom, and I think philosophically, freedom is the more primal concept. Watching it, and I did watch some of it at close, from near at hand. Watching it, I am cheered, because in Kamala Harris's mouth, freedom doesn't just have to be freedom from. And it's interesting to watch the trajectory, because the Democrats, because in a way, like where it started shows how pervasive the negative concept of freedom is. Because when they start with freedom, not you and not your friends, okay? But like when the Democrats generally start with freedom, they start with negative freedom, right? Like she was comfortable with the language of, okay, we're going to get the government off your backs, right? Or the government away from your bodies, as it might be. That was comfortable, and that's freedom. That's freedom from. And of course, freedom from is important. A government doesn't repress you as a necessary condition. But as they use the word more and more, they kind of are slipping, and you can watch this, they're slipping towards freedom as freedom to, which I think is correct. I think freedom to subsumes freedom from. Freedom from, as I was trying to say before, is only important because it enables freedom to. And that slippage is only possible on that side of the political spectrum. And so once they made the move of using the word freedom, it was going to be very likely that it was going to roll in this direction where it ends up being freedom to. And where people start to say, well, actually, it's not just not having guns in school, which makes us more free. Schools make us more free, right? All of the stuff we're advocating for here, these institutions, they're not just about redistribution or even justice. They're also about freedom. And I think that's correct, and I hope it works.
And the language is replete now: freedom to read, freedom to learn, freedom to live, freedom to choose, freedom to, all of that. Well, look, our distinguished audience here has a freedom to ask questions in addition to